it's official. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am first, and then we're going to talk about CPG. I thought it was important to tell you my story. So when I was 21, I'm from Argentina, and when I was 21, I went to a conference on ayahuasca in the middle of the jungle in the Amazon, because that's what you do when you're 21 and you're looking for answers. And I met a guy there, and we fell in love, and we traveled together. We bought hammocks, and we put them on this little boat, and we went down the Amazon River, 1,500 miles, and then down the coast of Brazil for 3,000 miles. We traveled together for 3 months, and we fell in love. And by the end of the trip, my mom was like, where the hell are you? Who is this guy? And I had to bring him to Argentina. And that first night in Argentina, I took him for a walk, and we had some gelato. We have a lot of Italians in Argentina. They developed the gelato industry, and so he had some Argentine gelato, and he looked at me and he said, wow, this is amazing. And I've never tried anything like it. I've been to Italy so many times, but this is different. Why don't we open an Argentine gelateria in the States? And it was a moment that was, ripe with possibility, right? It was just, like open. And I said, sure. And I was producing documentaries, and he was a software engineer, so it had nothing to do with our backgrounds. And it just sounded a little crazy, but it sounded like a dream, and I wanted to follow it, and I wanted to follow him. So we ended up coming to Washington, D.C. in 2004 and opening a tiny little store in Georgetown using local produce. We started selling at farmers markets, connected to the farming community that is so rich in the Mid-Atlantic. And it was a time in which farm to table was just beginning. So, a lot of people didn't understand why we didn't have strawberry in July. We only had it in May because it was growing in the region, and we use it only during its season. And we're still the same way. So we use, 70% of our ingredients come from the Mid-Atlantic community, and we still, buy from the same farms that we've been buying for 20 years. We're friends with the farmers. They became part of who we are. And so we opened a little shop, and then we opened another one, and another one, and another one, and we kept going, and we got to 8 shops. We had to close 2 during the pandemic, so these are the 6 that remain. And in 2019, and this is my factory. This is where I go to work every day. So I wanted to show you that, and where we make the gelato. And so in 2019, my husband went to a tasting with the Whole Foods buyer here in New York at the Javits Center, and he got there with his samples, and he thought he was going to open his little cooler and try to convince this guy, about our gelato. And he was like, I love your product, I don't need to try it, and I want you to go national with us. And we were like, what the F, Just like, whoa, he called me and he's like, we're gonna go national with Whole Foods. And I was like, wow, so happy and so terrified, so scared, but it was just this big thing, kind of like build an airplane as you fly it kind of thing. We were very small in CPG at the time, so we didn't have the infrastructure or the experience or anything, right? That was in 2019, and we are, as of today, in around 4,000 stores. So we've been growing a lot. And this is a little bit about who we are. And these are our offerings. So we have 7 SKUs, 7 products, right? They call them SKUs in CPG. And I put them there because I think it's very important to talk about assortment. It's something that I want to talk a little bit after. How many SKUs do you have? Which SKUs do you have? What are you selling? Price point, etc. So that's kind of our story, and it's not the traditional CPG story, okay? Because the way that we've done it is we funded it ourselves. We got money from my brick and mortar locations and put it into CPG, and that's how we did it. And we split it ourselves in half, and we never hired anybody for CPG now. So we do sales, we manage the broker relationships, My controller is the controller for both, CPG and brick and mortar. My chief of operations became an expert in product development, and he's the one that kind of formulates all the recipes. So it's not the typical way, right? And along the way, from 2019 until we went through a lot of challenges. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't, effortless by any means. And I always say, we're all warriors, like all women here. We all own restaurants, and we all know that the ups and downs are crazy. And just the roller coaster and everything that you go through, I feel like we're all in our own movie, we're all in our own little tale, of just what challenge is coming, how am I going to ride this wave, right? So for us, the waves were big when we went into CPG. And we only knew how to make the product ourselves, right? We came from that world of farmers market and hardcore, I'm going to do it on my own. And so we remodeled the factory. We put a lot of money into it. And we decided to hand pack for the launch of Whole Foods, 550 stores. We made 1 million pints that year, hand packing, 3 shifts. My Amish farmer was delivering grass-fed milk he was delivering 500 gallons 5 days a week. 10,000 gallons a month. And we started to lose a lot of money because we had a lot of labor. And you don't hand pack for CPG. It's not the thing to do. That's not how you do it. And we didn't have the margins. And so, we've never had this issue because we had our brick and mortar stores, and we figured out the P&L, we knew our margins, and we knew everything about it, but we didn't know much about CPG. And so suddenly we were like, what the hell are we doing, right? And it got really scary. And we decided we had to go to a co-packer. We hired a consultant actually, and he came and looked at everything. He was like, you guys are crazy, stop it right now. And we were like, okay, this is not working. But we had invested all this money in the factory, and we were making the product to our standards, and we didn't know what it meant to go to a co-packer. We actually didn't like the word co-packer, and it was just kind of, what are we doing? And so it was a big, kind of journey. And we ended up finding an incredible co-packer in Baltimore. We're in DC, and this guy is like blue collar, kind of do it my own way, and he kind of led us into the process and help us because the minimums are really high. You have to have inventory, all the things that we didn't have, right? We were making the product 3 shifts. We had people all the time, like kind of Oompa Loompa style, just like it was just crazy. So we were like, okay, what are we doing? This guy's gonna help us, we're gonna figure it out. And then my chief of operations became this expert into, rebalancing all of our recipes for the co-packer, and we had to find a third-party kitchen to make all of our inclusions because you have to be certified SQF, which is something I'm gonna talk about a little bit later, to be able to be in grocery stores. So we had to go to other people to make our inclusions the way that we wanted them. So it was a whole process, right? But we got there, and our margins improved. They're not great, they're still very thin, but we were able to make it, right? And we were able to continue growing slowly. So that's kind of my story, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the way that CPG is usually done, right? Because that's not the typical story. The typical story is, I create a product, but I think it's different somehow, right? That there is a need in the market. Or I love it so much that I think everybody's gonna love it, or something like that. And so you have a product, and then you have to go and raise money. That's kind of the typical way. So you go and you do a seed round, and you raise 1 to 2 million is what I put there. It could be 1 to 3 million. And a lot of that money is for team build out. And team build out is very different than brick and mortar because CPG is funded. It's an industry that is funded, right? And the rules are made by industry. Therefore, salaries are higher. We fund our own dreams. We pay ourselves maybe not as much. But in that industry, a GM makes $250,000, and a salesperson makes $175,000, and your marketing person makes the same thing. So you have to hire 3 or 4 people and you end up with a payroll that is over 600K a year. Therefore, you need money, right? So that's how it's usually done. And then you have to deal with inventory. You have to have a minimum of 3 months of inventory because of the volume, right? And that is 300K easy, right? That or in my case, it's more than that, that you have sitting there. It's money that is sitting there that you need to have. And then there's trade and slotting. So what is trade? There is something called trade spend. And trade spend is the money that you spend discounting your product. And it's required by grocery stores that you discount your product a minimum of 4 times a year at the 20 to 25% discount. And you pay for that. And you have to do it because you're competing. In my case, I'm competing with Talenti. I'm competing with Ben & Jerry, and they discount their product all the time. And if I don't do it, first of all, they kick me out of the grocery store. But also, I can compete because people buy when products are on sale. So the average trade spend in my category, which is frozen, is 27%. So 20% of your budget goes to promos. And just to give you an example, Whole Foods, every time you promo with them, they charge $11,000. It's a flat fee that you have to pay to promo. So there's not only the promos, there's flat fees, there's ads, there's all these requirements, right, that they have. And then there's a slot-in or free fill. So when you go into a grocery store, they demand that you fulfill their shelves. And they can do it as what is called a free fill, which is a little bit more gentle than slotting. And so, for example, going into Whole Foods, what they request is 2 cases per store of each SKU, each product. In my case, I show you I had 7 SKUs, right? 7 products. There's 550 stores. That means that you need, in my case, I needed $230,000 in product just to get into the shelves that I'm giving to them for free. So all those things you have to take into account when you're raising money, right? If I'm gonna go into 3 grocery stores, I'm gonna need, $600,000 just for trade, and I'm gonna need, slotting or whatever it is, So slotting is when you actually pay money to get into a grocery store. It's not even free fills. You're not giving them product, you're giving them cash. And that's with conventional retailers. So if you grow and you get to go into Kroger, Publix, Walmart, they will tell you, I want $40,000 or $50,000 for each product to get in. And that's how it is. So it's a very much pay-to-play game, right? In which you have to take all of this into consideration. And the other thing is marketing, because you are not well known and suddenly you are in a national stage. And so you need for people to know your brand. So you have to minimum assign 2% of your budget to marketing. Otherwise, no one knows you and it's hard to make it. If you do all of this, and you're able to get to between $5 and $10 million in sales, then you gotta do another growth round. You gotta go and raise more money, because that's the game, right? And then you go for $3 to $5 million. And what happens is, you gotta be very careful with dilution. So the cliche in CPG is the founder that ends up with 5 to 10% of their businesses when they sell it. Because they had to do so many rounds and they got so diluted that they have nothing. So you gotta be very careful with that. Extremely careful with dilution. All right, this is P&L, guys, okay? Basic P&L. It's different than for restaurants. So there's 2 holy grails in CPG. There's gross margin and velocity. This is how the P&L looks like. You have your labor or tolling. Tolling is what the co-packer charges you. So, or you do the product, you make the product yourself, that's labor, or you have tolling. Then there's your costs, packaging, the money that you spend on promotions, and suddenly you have your gross margin. So a healthy gross margin is around 30%. If you have less than that, but you have a plan to get to 30, you're fine. I had 0 gross margin, remember? Like I came from nothing, right? I was in ruins, and now I have an okay gross margin. I don't have 30, but I'm like in the 20s. So if you can get there, that's okay. And why is it so important? Because in general, CPG companies lose money, okay? So because of that, you need a healthy gross margin so that an investor or yourself eventually knows that you're going to be profitable. If you don't have a healthy gross margin, you're losing money because you're spending a lot in trade, you're losing money because you decided to invest in marketing. That's a decision that you're making, right? Because you know that eventually you're going to get to 10 million and you're going to be profitable. But the only way that you're going to be profitable is if you have an okay gross margin. Otherwise, you're not going to be profitable. And in this day and age, in which lending and investing is very difficult because of interest rates, private equity is much more careful, in lending money or investing. And they're looking at this. They're looking at companies that have healthy gross margins. Otherwise, they're going to say, hey, I don't know if I want to invest in your company because your costs are too high. You're spending too much money on packaging, and et cetera, and you're not going to get there. So that's extremely important. The other holy grail, velocity. It's units per store per week. So you have to perform. There is an expectation of how many units you're going to sell, and it depends on your category. So for ice cream, it could be 5 units that Whole Foods wants me to sell per store per week. For another product, it could be 2, it could be 7. It depends on your category. But the buyers are very clear, right? This is the expectation, and if your product doesn't perform, they'll kick you out. This is real estate, right? You're paying for real estate. And you have to perform. You have to make money for them. So you've got to be very careful because, you go into a grocery store, you spend all this money on refills, you spend all this money on slotting, and perhaps you don't perform, and after a year, you're out. And so you have to do your P&L, your ROI, your projections, and make sure that you're performing before you do it. Yeah. 5 minutes, Jesus, okay. I won't have time. I'm gonna run through this, okay? Then you have a distributor. The distributor charges 13%, guys, in general, okay? Because you can't distribute your product all over the country. Usually, the biggest ones are Unify or Kehi. Your trade, I told you, is 25 to 30. The broker manages your relationships. It opens doors. It's the one that connects you with the buyer and says, hey, there is a review. You can talk to Kroger's buyer. You can talk to this buyer. It's the one that submits your promos. It's the one that takes care of your products. So you need a broker, 5%. Marketing, I told you. And then the price point, right? You got to remember that the retailer is going to mark up your product 40 to 55%. If you're in the natural channel, it could be a little bit less if you're in conventional. So think about it. Look at the pricing in your category and make sure that you're doing the math so that your pricing is kind of average. If you have a good product, you can charge it more. If right? But you got to do the math and see what works. And then co-packing versus making your product. If you decide to go into co-packing, you have to be SQF. If you make your own product, you have to be SQF. It's Safe Quality Food. It's a food safety program that is recognized by everyone, including other countries, and it's audited. So it's not that you can go and make your own filling for your cookie, right? You can't. You have to find a kitchen that makes the filling for you that is SQF. Or you have to get SQF certified, which is a very difficult process. So you have to take this into account, and then ingredients, minimums. If you're buying your filling for your cookie and you're using a kitchen, that kitchen is going to have high minimums because it's CPG and it's a game of volume, right? And so that's how it is, and you have to deal with that. Exit. Now what? Okay, if you made it all the way and you have a company that is selling, I don't know, $20 million and it's profitable, hell yeah. You can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can sell it, you can keep it, you can give it to your children, I don't know. If you're losing money and you made it to that far, you can still sell it if you have a lot of volume, you will. So that's kind of the goal, right? The goal, the industry is owned by 10 companies. It's Unilever, it's Nestle, and then there's 10% of small brands that are fighting for air. And they all want to be acquired. They all want the aliens to come and absorb them. And so if you get there, then good for you. But if you're profitable, you're strong, and you can decide. And that's it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so fun to listen to. Do I need this, or do I have all these mics on
Yeah,
me?
let's see. I know you do have 2 mics on you. Let's see if the one behind you, if you press the button.
Will you press
I'll
the
help
button
you. Yep.
for me?
Sorry, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
There you go. Okay, let's see if that works.
Is that working? Can you hear me?
Let's do that hand. Okay, we'll just do. I'm sorry for all that.
It's okay. I think. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited. Hi. So excited to be here, and I'm particularly excited because I didn't know that Violeta and my story were so similar when they put us together. So I'm going to try to skip over some of the parts that that would be repeats and focus on the parts that she didn't get time to touch on yet. Let's see. Here I am. Also, just a side note. I know some of you are building pitch decks, so when I was putting together my slides, I pulled some slides out of our pitch deck, because when I'm building a deck, I always love seeing other people's decks. So this is not by any means a full deck, but it gives you a little bit of a sense of how you can incorporate brand and story into what you're presenting. So I also am partnered with my husband. He's my business partner, which is a whole nother story. I'm writing a book about it, so I can share that with you another time. In 2009, my husband and I reinvented our lives and opened our first restaurant together. It was a little Indian street food restaurant. It was in the middle of the Great Recession when banks were locked down. The SBA was frozen. Nobody was lending money to anyone, which was why we were looking for a job, because our careers had exploded. We were 39 years old, and we basically pinched together microloans, friends and family, leveraged credit card debt, and did it the hard way, which you all know what this looks like. This is how we all build restaurants. You get a group of friends together, we pulled up the greasy, disgusting carpet, we did everything ourselves. And that was really how we made it work. What I will say is that so much of what we learned to become successful, we learned on the job by making a million mistakes. So I don't just want to share with you today our success story. I want to share with you what those mistakes were in the hope. You're going to make your own mistakes. That's just part of the gig in this industry. It's like that's how we hone our craft. But hopefully you won't have to make the exact same mistakes that I made. So hopefully by sharing some of what we did, similar to Violeta's story, ours is not a typical story. We did not know what the hell we were doing when we started a restaurant or when we stumbled into a CPG line. But for it all to work at the end of the day, we just needed to believe that everything is figure-outable and jump into the deep end and do it. Michael, I'm going to put my notes here because if I don't, I'll talk for 45 minutes by accident. There is that's my daughter. She's now 21. She is going to the school that Violeta graduated from, American in DC. So there's an important value that's at the core of the success of our business, and that is that we found something we truly love, like madly, deeply love. And it's not just that we're running our own business, it's this industry. It's the magic that can happen when you bring people together around food. So this quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So all of the growth that happened in our business, we learned the hard way. We had to always be asking that question first. Does it light us up? What's the hell yeah reason to do it? Because one of the things we did wrong was we chased too many things too fast. And we got ahead of our skis. And there's opportunity cost on your life, on our family, on your team that have to pick up the slack and try to make it work. So we learned the hard way to ask ourselves that question. Is it a hell yes when we start getting excited about all the bright, shiny objects and good ideas? So this is a slide that I pulled from one of our pitch decks. So it ends in 2022, but we're still going. In the beginning, these first few years, it was just full immersion, like we all do restaurants, right? I was running the register, my husband was running the line. He literally learned how to be a chef on the line. That was not our plan in the beginning. He had no professional training. But we had started an Indian street food restaurant, and the chef that we hired that came with the pedigree didn't get the flavor profile. We had to let him go, and my husband had to step in. So we learned how to do this, literally boots on the ground. Then our strategy was we wanted to grow our business because we wanted to have an exit strategy, not for ourselves to exit the business, but to exit the phase of doing everything ourselves forever and evermore, which is the phase that many restaurateurs spend their entire careers in. And I grew up in this business in a family-run restaurant, and I saw the impact of that. And I didn't want to relive that story. So when I agreed to follow my husband's crazy middle-of-the-night midlife crisis idea of opening an Indian street food restaurant in a small mountain town with a tragic lack of diversity, it was a big risk. There was nothing like it happening in our town at the time. So, boots on the ground, worked really, really hard. The business took off. It had lines from day one that never went away. So we started to figure it out, and we started to grow. In 2013, we started to expand our restaurant group and grow more restaurants. We got attracted to bright, shiny objects and got distracted from our core profitability. But we started to get a lot of recognition, and that's what's on the top of that slide. We started to get James Beard nominations. We started to get a lot of press. Our restaurant group started to become more and more well-known. So in 2018, my husband comes to me with this idea. And we had been talking really for years about, oh, we really should bottle our spices or figure out a way to sell our chutney in-house, or it would be great if we could diversify our business a little bit and go into the CPG line, but we really had no idea how to get started. And similar to Violeta's story, we just kind of jumped in the deep end and did it ourselves. We funded it ourselves and once again got ahead of our skis. So when he said to me, I wish I had a recording of every time my husband has said this, but I do remember him distinctly saying, "This will be the easiest thing we've ever done." Well, it turns out packaged goods is an entirely different industry with a different profit margin and different strategy, and being excellent in the restaurant space does not necessarily translate to being excellent in the CPG space. So originally the idea was, one of our food distributors came to us asking where we get our spices, because chefs were asking him for these different spices and he couldn't find them. We're an Indian street food restaurant, so we were already importing our own spices to be able to get what we needed. We were roasting them and grinding them fresh in-house. So we knew the qualitative difference between the product that we had at the end of the day with our spice and what's sold in a bottle, that's on a shelf, that's gone through all these middlemen, that's been exported from who knows where, and then sat in a warehouse. So the idea was, what if we just bought more spices and just imported more, got a little clean room, started a warehouse, got our own grinder and roaster, and we literally started with a handful of burnt out line cooks who were tired of working on the line and wanted to do something else, and we didn't want to let go of them, so we started this little factory. That's how it began. All of that would have been probably fine in the sense that Marwan's idea of it being the easiest thing, but as usual, we complicated it, and this is what we ended up with. So we started with these large wholesale size containers, and what our differentiating story was, what was going to make our thing special is we were for chefs by chefs. So this was a quality product. We wanted to improve the spices of the world. We wanted people's kitchens to smell like my husband's mother's kitchen does in India. And that was all going great, but the chefs loved the product. Then they didn't want to work with the distributor we were working with, who was handling that side of things for us. So then we had to learn about other distributors. Then people started seeing the products and really wanted them, so we had to create these smaller tins. We wanted to sell them in our own restaurants. You get the idea. all of a sudden we tumbled into all of these different form factors. Okay, it turns out form factor is a thing in CPG. You have to know about, you have to understand that each one of these form factors requires its own expertise. It has its own profit margin. Then we stumbled into all of these different sales channels. Once again, this is a lesson. We were too ambitious. We went too big with our SKUs. When I saw Violeta's list of her SKUs, I was like, that's a brilliant woman there. We started with hundreds of SKUs. Big mistake. And we were like, so here was our thought process. We were like, okay, let's just put it all out there and see what works. We'll work backwards off of that. That was our thinking at the time. So the issue is, we were experimenting with D2C in all of these different platforms. We were experimenting with wholesale in all of these different platforms. We were experimenting with food service, distribution, and all of that. And the problem with that idea is when an opportunity strikes, you do not have the production facilities to catch that opportunity. So that's what happened. We were right in the middle of trying to figure out, okay, here's our ratios. How do we reach profitability in each one of these? Meanwhile, we're restaurateurs, we don't know what we're doing. So we're having to learn everything ourselves. We didn't hire anybody with a big salary. We were just figuring this all out. We were right in the middle of figuring out these ratios and figuring out how to reach profitability in each one of these zones when this happened. Yeah. Am I complaining? No. But we were 100% not ready for this. And this is where having too many SKUs and too many sales channels and not being able to utilize our time well really caught up with us. So let me just say, the way that you get on Oprah's favorite things list is you send her your product. So we had mailed our product off, along with a bunch of other places, not thinking anything about it, not in a million years thinking we were going to get selected. We were in our first year of business. We were hand packing the spices and hand labeling the tins and shipping them ourselves. Okay? We get the call that we're being considered for Oprah's favorite things list. So to say that we had to scramble is like just the understatement of the century. My husband and I had to divide and conquer. He had to basically move into Spicewalla. We're back to 80-hour weeks trying to figure this out. When you get this notification that you're being considered for the list, there's certain criteria that you have to meet to be able to get on the final list. One of the criteria is you have to be onboarded with Amazon. We were not onboarded with Amazon. We weren't even really sure if we wanted to be onboarded with Amazon at the time, but we had to in order to be considered for this. The other thing is you have to reach certain metrics. And those metrics are be prepared for your business's growth to grow exponentially more than it is right now. Are you prepared for that? Are you set up with a co-packer? Well, here's the things that we did the wrong way. We had seen these cute little tins over here, and we're like, oh, we're going to differentiate ourselves by having square tins because they're cool, and we liked the way they looked. It turns out co-packers don't do square tins because they don't have factory machines that actually work with the square tins. We found one now that did, but at the time we couldn't find one. So we had to keep packing all of this ourselves. Then we found out that there were not enough square tins in all of America to match the metrics that they were telling us we had to have. So we literally had to quadruple our staff size just to research where the hell are these damn tins and import them from China on a slow boat, and we're like, oh my God, are they gonna reach in time? Meanwhile, you don't know if you're gonna make the list. You're doing all of this in hopes, exactly. So it's risky. If we'd had less SKUs, this would have been easier. Remember that. So we did, in fact, make Oprah's favorite things list that year, which was like basically a year in for us, and it completely put our business in a whole different stratosphere. I think the sales right after that were 400% what they had been before. So essentially, Oprah launched our business. And that led to unprecedented media coverage, which in turn then created the engagement and started to drive consumer behavior and made us a more recognizable name. What we did to get in all of these publications is we sent them our product. So aim high. And the thing is, make it beautiful. Like, send a beautiful package, write a lovely letter, own and claim what makes you unique. If you're minority run, female led, own it, name it, claim it, and put it right out in front, because they care about these things. And we would submit to these writers, and then they would ask us, do you work with an affiliate? That is a whole nother rabbit hole that is like we could spend 20 minutes just talking about affiliates, but it's a real thing, and I'm happy to answer questions later in our small, what are we calling it, deep dives? Yeah, office hours. But basically, when you see all these top 10 lists, or like the best spices of 2022 lists, people are working with affiliates as the middleman to help you get on all of those lists. If your product sucks, they're not going to pick you. So you have to have a good product. But how do you get your good product to be seen and noticed? We signed up with an affiliate, we submitted our product to all of these places, and it got picked up. So that started to grow. And at the same time, our restaurant group was taking off, and my husband started getting James Beard Best Chef nominations. And so we leveraged his chef-y status that was growing with really fun opportunities, influencers, celebrities, and grabbed all of those opportunities that we possibly could. Whether we like it or not, influencers really are a lot of how marketing works right now. So understanding how to leverage that. Merwin met T-Pain in a commercial shoot for a Kingsford barbecue grill or something. And they just started chatting and they hit it off. And then Merwin had this great idea of like, what if we gave T-Pain his own line of barbecue spices? And he was all over it and he was so excited about it. So we started to work this idea of collaborations. How do you come up with a chef blend or a celebrity blend it's like their mom's recipe that they grew up with, that they want to share with the world? And we started to do these collaborations, and that started to grow our brand. That helped us start to really get our legs under us for the first time since we had started a CPG line. We started to recognize not only what's different about our product, but where does our brand shine in the marketplace? And we identified that the best way for us to share our story with the world was when we lean into the storytelling, when we lean into the chef's stories. We started to highlight these chefs. We started to partner with them when they were releasing a cookbook or starting a new venture. And that helped us see that to go back to that sales channel slide where there was like all of these sales channels, we started to whittle them down. And we recognized that the most profitable ones were the ones that allowed us to tell the story. So direct to consumer, our own website, independent little shops where they can highlight your spices on the shelf. We're still in Whole Foods, but we're pretty lost, honestly, on the shelf in Whole Foods. People are just looking for whatever, they're going for paprika. Why are they going to spend more money on your special home roasted thing? They're just buying paprika. So we needed to focus on the places that gave us the opportunity to do what we did best, which was our storytelling component. We partnered with a lot of chefs, and it's a wonderful opportunity for chefs because if they're coming out with a cookbook, it really helps them sell their cookbook if they've got like a product that they can sell along with it. This is sort of part of the world of marketing that we're in these days. So partnering with chefs, friends, people that are doing interesting things in our industry, that really helped sort of, it not only engaged their audience, it kept our audience engaged. And it's like a win-win, right? We're helping them, they're helping us. And it was fun. It started sort of like helping us identify what's the fun part of this that really lights us up. So we started to get clear on what those things are. What are our strengths as a CPG line? We've talked a lot about the mistakes we made. We finally started to get clear on what our strengths were. I'm not going to read through all of this. I feel like I'm out of breath. I'm talking so fast to try to keep us on time. But you're getting the slides, so you can read that later. These were the things that we identified. What is our main focus, right? We started with by chefs for chefs, but we ended up doing all this other stuff, got ahead of our skis and tumbled down the mountain so many times. Finally, we were starting to like come back together, be more strategic in our decisions, be really clear that these were the things that we needed to focus on. And then the world fell apart, and we had a pandemic. So the thing that I want to say about that is it actually, having a diversified income source when our restaurants were locked down was huge for us. And at the end of the day, even though we had jumped in the deep end and didn't know what we were doing and fumbled our way through learning all of this and didn't do it the typical way, same thing as Violeta was sharing, we did it all the wrong ways. At the end of the day, we were so glad that the timing lined up, that we had this other division when we had to shutter our restaurants and close them. We didn't actually end up we closed one restaurant during the pandemic, but we were able to keep them all in takeout mode, but we weren't paying ourselves, we weren't paying our top executives, we were struggling. So when the restaurants were shut down, the spice business took off because everybody was cooking from home. And people were also looking for content. They were bored. So here I am behind the camera in my pajamas with marijuana in our kitchen. We started developing content from home with just our iPhone of like cooking demos and storytelling about food and giving people ideas of what they could do with their spices. And it really created engagement. And it connected us with our customer base in a way that we had not yet been fully connected. So it turned out to be a huge opportunity, not just financially, but also sort of in the ecosystem of our business. We continue to lean into that. We sort of think of it as like we're building the iTunes of culinary content. We continue to work with chefs. We continue to tell those stories. We started finally hiring other people to do that for us so that my husband could move back into our bedroom and not be literally sleeping in the Spicewalla factory. That helped. We started to get really clear on what our goals were and how these two divisions that we kind of accidentally created. We had the restaurant group, and then we had this CPG line that had really grown faster than we were ready for. We started to look at what's the bigger vision for that? How do we continue to sort of make sure that this lights us up, that we're doing the work that we really love? And then this happened. So we talked about the Oprah effect. There is also a James Beard Award effect. And our first restaurant, Chai Pani in Asheville, won the James Beard Most Outstanding Restaurant that year. This was 2022. And to say that we were flabbergasted again was just like, we were completely unprepared for how that was going to feel, because even to be considered in that category as a fast casual, no reservation, tiny 13 table restaurant was pretty mind-blowing. What happened, the impact of that award looked like this. So initially we had 300 total media placements as a result. That turned into 1.9 billion unique impressions within our social media, within other media, how that media got shared. The reason that that number is so big is because of the James Beard effect, but also we're representing Indian street food. Over 1 billion people lost their collective shit when an Indian street food restaurant won this award that historically has gone to much fancier fine dining Michelin star type restaurants. In India, street food is like our hot dogs in a cart, right? It's the most democratic food that everybody eats, but it had not yet been elevated to be considered even a cuisine. So they just went crazy. And sharing that internationally was exhilarating for us. And the reason I'm sharing this is because it was really fun, number one, but also number two, having our brands connected really benefited both. There's a halo effect, right? So it's something really, when the Oprah effect happened to our spices, our restaurant group benefited. When this happened to our restaurant group, our spice line benefited. So creating a CPG line that continues to tell your story, whatever it is that you do, that really leans into what makes you special and your story special. That's why that number grew so much, because the story itself was really exciting, that we were elevating street food into this category. What that allowed us to do was to go back to, why the hell are we growing in the first place? For us, it came down to that exit strategy that we were talking about. How do we exit from the phase of doing everything ourselves? Building the CPG line allowed us to build this team. It engaged our team. So those faces that were in that doorway in Chai Pani when we were doing the ribbon cutting, those are the same faces that are here. This Charlotte Stack is our, she started working with us when she was 20 years old as a server, and she is now our COO. Daniel Peach was a little skate punk, 19 line cook that we grew into, he's our regional culinary director now. So that's our why. And what all of the press and the this and the that and these things that we leveraged, the thing about the press is it allowed us to become a household name without having to pay Amazon to pay to play, because they charge a lot of money, right? So becoming a household name through these collaborations, through the influencers, through getting our brand out there, through being really bold with who we sent it to and shared it with, that's how we got all of that recognition, which allowed our business to grow and ultimately went back to our why. Because if you're doing all this CPG stuff, you can end up suddenly going from a business you love to spending the day behind a computer looking at spreadsheets. So you have to be intentional with how and why. There's a phase where there's a whole big ass pile of spreadsheets you've got to deal with. That's part of reality. But if you don't want to get stuck there, you have to keep connecting your CPG line with your bigger goal, your why. So for us, it was this. It was the team, being able to grow a team. And ultimately, that got my husband and I out of the phase of doing everything ourselves. We are still married. We do still love each other. That feels like a success story right there. Okay, that's it for me. That's my story.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly and Violeta. As we shared earlier, we'll have office hours towards the end of the day, so lots more time to ask these two women questions. But we'll take about one or two right now before we break for lunch. I'll start right there.
Hi, this is mostly for Violeta. My business is also ice cream. Can you talk to the relationship of how the CPG integrates with your original brand? I think for me as a shop owner, I consider retail, the grocery store, to be a competitor in some ways. People can go buy a pint of ice cream or they can come to my scoop shop. So what was that thought process like for you as you entered CPG?
I thought about it the opposite way. I thought that it would be complementary. But it's true what you're saying, right? And even with my brand, you can get a pint of gelato cheaper than what you can get it at my brick and mortar. I charge more when you go into the store because I have 200 flavors that I go throughout the year, and I hand packed, and I think that's a premium. But our idea was always, hey, what if we open brick and mortar all over the country, and that's our living room into the experience? and that's going to boost our CPG, and we go and conquer the world. I'm still trying. I haven't gotten there, but that's kind of what we thought, that the shop is the marketing, is the branding, it's the feel of who you are. And then, they would be like, oh, now I want to buy this ice cream at my grocery store. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to make this question easy, but there's so many. So you guys both kind of said this kind of accidentally happened, and and the Oprah effect made you kind of get your way through. We have this sauce that, and I asked this question is, we have this sauce that we feel like there's a need out there that we could co-package, and then doing the research, trying to look for a co-packager and all that kind of scared me down. I chickened out. So do you think if it happened accidentally like this, it made it happen because of that, or because you guys are saying be ready, and that kind of discouraged me by just trying to be ready. So is there another way to
Go first.
What's that?
Do you want to go first? Do you
Sure.
answer that?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. When I was preparing my presentation, I was like, I don't want to scare them, but I am in a little bit, right? And because I'm saying, hey, there are all these challenges ahead, and be ready. And one of the things I didn't have was that when I started CPG, I didn't have anybody to sit with me and be like, hey, you're going to spend 27% in trade. I had no idea. On the other hand, so much about what we do is following your instinct and your gut and being open, and you can't lose that, right? So it's like a fine balance, right? Mm-hmm. Between, what is fulfilling and meaningful to you and the minefield that you have ahead of you. So be prepared, but follow your heart.
Yeah, totally ditto that. Yes to that. And also, I think we just met 5 minutes before this presentation, but we immediately resonated with our excitement about sharing our mistakes with you. The point of that is it might not be as hard for you if you knew a little bit more than I did when you start. I am a big fan of jumping in the deep end, even if disaster strikes, because if you're paying attention to the mistakes that you make along the way, you'll crush it. The point is to not keep making the same mistakes over and over again, right? But don't be afraid of the mistakes. Go for it. That's my gut feeling. Yes.
So I have a question. It's kind of to both of you, but how, when you're focused on your CPG line, how do you not lose focus of your brick and mortar, your other piece? Because I'm in that situation now where I have two brands and I'm finding it hard to be able to make sure I give both brands the right amount of time, because they're both growing brands that both need equal attention.
Yeah, totally. That's the challenge. And we made a lot of mistakes about that. And I think ultimately we had to divide and conquer. Because I had a business partner in it, my husband went into more of the CPG focus and I focused more on restaurant operations. But I think the alternative to that is to hire someone that can be in that with you. Because there is an opportunity cost, like what I was talking about before. If you don't prepare yourself, you can't be in 20 places at once, although most restaurateurs actually can. Let's just be real. We can solve all of the world's problems because you guys are rock stars. But there's a toll that takes, right? So bring in people. If you don't have a partner that you can divide and conquer with, then bring in the people that can help you get there. And the other route for that is when you were showing, you can get investment, and that's how you can pay those people. Do you want to say more to that?
Yeah, so our time is the most valuable thing we have. Our time as business owners, and management of our own time is what is going to make us successful. So that's extremely important that we all understand what we're doing with our time. We split it ourselves, and to be honest, CPG doesn't take as much time as brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is brutal, right? We deal with all the problems of angry customers and employees that are crazy and everything breaks. So it's all the time, and so it's very consuming.
Yes.
And CPG, you hire 2-3 people, and you're on your computer, and you jump on Zoom and have a call, and it's not that difficult managing your time to do CPG because it requires less of you. it's a very difficult business, like I show you, right? So like if you want to make it a volume, right, you're gonna have to, do a lot of things right. But in terms of managing your time, I would say it takes probably 30 to 40% of my time. And I've been able to grow my business up to like $5 million without hiring anybody, but I'm at the point in which I also need to hire somebody. And it's also coming from a place of investors. And so investors look at you and they are like, okay, how are you splitting your time, right? Same question, like, and if we want to grow this business, then you need a salesperson. And they're right. So, yeah.